Her uncle called it junk shop trash. The idol called her heir to the forbidden line. Uncle Ferris left me 4 things when he died: a 1987 Buick that didn't start, a stack of unpaid storage fees, a garage that smelled like motor oil and regret, and a 6-inch stone idol he'd kept wrapped in a gym sock inside a tackle box for 30 years. The lawyer handed me the box like it was radioactive. He was very specific that this goes to you, not your brother, not the museum he used to call about. A pause. He called 4 times last year asking if they'd finally come to their senses. They never called back. I unwrapped the idol on his workbench under a single bare bulb, surrounded by socket wrenches and a calendar from 2 years ago still open to March. It was squat, frog-faced, carved from something the color of old teeth, with both hands pressed flat against its own chest, like it was holding in a secret or a sneeze. Junk shop trash, I said out loud, mostly because it felt true, and partly because Ferris used to say it about everything he loved: his boat, his second wife's casserole recipes, me, once, fondly, after I got my doctorate in a field with a hiring rate somewhere south of generous. I am an archivist. Was an archivist technically, until the regional museum restructured me out of a job 8 months ago for the crime of being the department's only line item under 40. I know what real antiquities feel like in the hand, that particular density, like the stone remembers being something heavier than stone. This thing had it. Ferris's note, written on the back of a hardware store receipt, said only, "Don't let them tell you it's nothing, F." I should say here that Ferris was the kind of man who once tried to convince a state trooper that his truck's expired registration was more of a suggestion, and who, at my mother's funeral, wore a Hawaiian shirt because he said the deceased had always hated black on him specifically. So I did not, initially, take the note as gospel. But I also remembered the museum calls. I'd worked there 4 of the years he made them. I remembered the intake desk rolling their eyes every time his name came up on the caller display, remembered someone in collections referring to him, not unkindly, but not kindly either, as the idol guy. Nobody had ever gone to look. Nobody had ever driven the 40 minutes to his garage to actually hold the thing, because a retired marine mechanic with a Buick that didn't start was not, in the calculus of institutional credibility, a source worth a tank of gas. I had believed that calculus too, back when I still had a desk. That was the part that sat wrong in my chest at 2 in the morning, going through his things. Not that they'd dismissed him, that I would have, 6 months ago, dismissed him exactly the same way. I did, however, spend 3 days running it through every database I had access to before they revoked my login. Got nothing. No catalog match, no glyph correlation, no carbon date because no lab would touch a family heirloom without $600 I didn't have. What I got instead was a headache, a garage full of dead wasps, and Ferris's old radio playing static on a station that hadn't existed since the Clinton administration. On the 4th night, I gave up being scientific about it and just talked to the thing. The way you talk to a car that won't start, or a printer that's judging you. "Okay," I said, what is the deal with you?" I want to be clear that I did not expect an answer. I expected, at most, to feel slightly insane in a quiet, private way, the way you do when you apologize to furniture you've stubbed your toe on. What I got instead was the idol's frog-flat hands sliding apart from its chest, with a sound like a knuckle cracking underwater, and a thin seam of amber light spilling out from wherever its heart would be, if it had one, if it needed one. I knocked over a coffee can full of nails getting away from it. "Absolutely not," I told the garage. The garage did not respond, which I appreciated. The idol did. "You are loud for a 10th. The voice didn't come from the idol so much as from the inside of my own molars, a vibration that settled into my teeth and stayed there like a held note. I sat back down on the overturned coffee can because my legs had developed opinions of their own. A 10th what? A 10th bearer of the line they could not break. The light steadied, gold and patient, throwing the idol's frog shadow huge across Ferris's pegboard of mismatched tools. "We have waited in 11 hands before yours. 9 called us idle, 1 called us trash, and meant it as protection." "That tracks," I said, because of course Ferris had meant it kindly. He'd been protecting it the only way he knew how, by making sure nobody else wanted it badly enough to take it from a man with a bad hip and a worse truck. He was ninth. He held us 30 years, and asked for nothing. A pause that felt, impossibly, amused. He asked the museum, repeatedly, to take this seriously, and they did not. We found that very funny. You found that funny. We have a great deal of time to develop a sense of humor, 10th. Stop calling me 10th. I have a name. We know your name. The light brightened slightly, in a way I would later decide was the idol's version of raising an eyebrow. We have known it since you were 9 years old, and your uncle let you hold us once, in this same garage, and you asked him if we were a frog god or a regular god. We found that question very funny as well. I did not remember this. I sat with that for a second. The idea that I'd already held it once, as a kid, in some forgotten afternoon, while Ferris probably told me to be careful with his tools, and not the actual 11,000-year-old artifact propped between the radio and a coffee can of screws, and something in my chest rearranged itself slightly. He let a 9-year-old hold you. He trusted his own judgment of who could be trusted. He was usually right. A pause, and the light dipped, almost wry. He was wrong about the Buick. The Buick is unforgivable. Yes. I should mention that somewhere around here I stopped being scared and started being something closer to furious, in the specific way you get furious when you've spent 8 months being told your expertise is a redundant cost center by people who would not have recognized a genuine 11,000-year-old artifact if it bit them, and this thing had apparently spent 3 decades sitting in a tackle box, being correctly identified as important by a man who fixed boat engines for a living and never once finished a sentence about feelings. Why us, I said. Why my family? Why not the museum, the actual scholars, the people with degrees and labs and... Scholars catalog. The light pulsed, almost gentle. The line does not need cataloging, it needs holding. Your uncle held us through every season he had nothing. Through the boat that sank, through the wife who left and the wife who stayed. He never once asked us to be worth something. He only asked that we be safe. And me? You asked what we are, with your whole loud, frightened chest, and you did not run when we answered. The frog hands came back together, slower this time, almost, and I want to stress I am aware how this sounds, fondly. 8 months you have been told your knowing is worthless. We have been told that for 11,000 years. We thought you should know you are not the only one who survived being called nothing. I sat on that overturned coffee can in my dead uncle's garage and cried, a little, in the unglamorous way where your nose gets involved and there's no tissue within reach, while a frog-shaped rock that remembered being heavier than stone told me, essentially, that I'd inherited a job nobody else had been patient enough to want. What do I do with you? I finally asked. Practically, I can't exactly put you back in the tackle box. You will know. The light dimmed, folding itself back into the stone like a held breath finally let go. The 9th did not know either, at first. He only knew not to let go. The bulb above the workbench flickered once and steadied. Outside, somebody's dog was barking at nothing, the way dogs do. I picked the idol up. It was warm now. Warm the way a stone left in sun is warm, except the garage hadn't seen sun in hours, and I held it the way you'd hold something you'd just understood you'd been trusted with, rather than handed. I still don't have a catalog number for it. I still don't have a lab willing to date it for free. What I have is a name the museum never bothered to ask for, written on the back of a hardware store receipt by a man who knew exactly what he was protecting and called it trash on purpose, so nobody would think to look twice. 10th bearer, junk shop trash. Both true. I'm working on deciding which one I put on the business card.